27 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council, where there's just so much glorious information to be delivered by so many outstanding people. But first, Mr. Dehoney, a SEMCOG presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We're very pleased this evening to have representative from SEMCOG here, Mr. Kevin Petrano. He will be doing a check presentation, and Senator Shink stopped by. We're going to hear some remarks from her after Kevin. And then Jordan, who's getting the money, will, so he thinks, will say a few words about the project, and then we'll do a photo op up here. So with that.
Practically perfect in every way.
Kevin, come on up.
Thank you, and thank you, Council. So happy to be here today. As was mentioned, I'm Kevin Vetrano, Planning Director for SEMCOG, and thank you for your membership within our organization. As you might know, we're a membership organization of 187 communities and members from across Southeast Michigan, so all 7 counties of our region. Today, we're presenting a check through our Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, referred to as CMAQ, and the purpose of that program is to invest and reward and award transportation projects to deal with air quality. So anything that improves transit, you can put in for EV charging stations, as well as roundabouts and things that help with both congestion as well as the free flow of automobile traffic. And this project in particular we're really excited about because the city did a great job of integrating multiple different aspects. Sometimes there's a roundabout, doesn't do as much for the pedestrians or the bicyclists. Ann Arbor being so bike and walk friendly, this proposal looks great to be able to provide multiple multimodal transportation options. So just here to congratulate the city, provide the check, and so happy for your membership in SEMCOG. Thank you very much.
Hi, I don't think I need to say too much except for this is really exciting. This is a place that hundreds, maybe thousands of people drive, bike, and walk through each day, and it's exciting to be part of this big, beautiful, if sometimes messy puzzle that makes all these great things happen. So thank you for all that you do too.
Good evening, Council. I'm Jordan Roberts, Public Services Area Administrator, and I'm here today to recognize an exciting transportation improvement at the intersection of Pontiac Trail and DuVerin. As our SEMCOG rep said, it's through the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grant, which is done by the Federal Highway Administration and administered by SEMCOG. We were selected for this project because it's a great example of what we can do. This project is going to construct a modern roundabout at the intersection. Right now, DuVerin traffic is controlled by a stop sign, while Pontiac Trail traffic is not. This can make turning movements difficult, sometimes frustrating. The roundabout will help address that by improving overall traffic flow and reducing delays. It'll also slow traffic flow along Pontiac Trail in both directions, which improves safety while keeping vehicles moving efficiently. In addition, the roundabout will serve as a gateway into the city for those entering from the north, creating a sense of arrival. We're also expecting improved pedestrian safety and better connectivity through the intersection. As part of the project, we'll be constructing new sidewalk along the east side of Pontiac Trail, just south of DuVerin. This will close the final gap in the sidewalk network on that stretch, making it safer and more accessible for people walking in the area. And as part of this, there'll be some utility work, including extending or relocating infrastructure to accommodate the new roundabout. This grant and the partnership with SEMCOG is a strong example of how targeted investments can improve safety, mobility, and environmental outcomes for our community. Thank you.
Sure. Your council members?
Yeah.
Council members?
Yeah.
Come around. Come around as you will. Okay.
Exactly. That would be even better, yes.
How you should come on.
Okay, yeah. You can take turns. Right. Look at me for 1, 2, 3. Thank you, great.
Can I start looking this way too? Thanks, everybody.
Yours to
Do with it what
take
you will.
to the bank.
Awesome.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Do you want to?
I just do. Please. Before people adjourn and we move on to the next super interesting, the next exciting thing, I just want to express a great deal of gratitude to SEMCOG, Senator Schenk, and really everyone else who was involved in helping the city get this crucial grant. Obviously, we are working incredibly hard to have a transportation network that is safe and effective, and we can do a great deal on our own, but we can't do everything on our own. And with regional partners and partners up in Lansing, it is made all the easier, and we're getting to do what we can do for our residents even faster. So a lot of gratitude all around. Just want to say thank you so much. All right, Mr. Mahoney.
We're going to have 4 presentations this evening. First up is on the water and sanitary utility study findings. This is something that you heard about probably going back a year ago. So Sky Stewart and team will be doing the presentation. We also have one of the team members that's away in Indianapolis, and I believe she'll be available on the screen, and then that will be followed by a presentation from the Housing Commission. So Sky, come on up.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. Touchpad's off, sorry. This one's you here?
Yep.
And then all you need to do is just click this to go forward. This is back, and it'll shut down when your presentation's over.
All right, sounds great. All right, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening to provide some updates on 2 key utility planning studies that are currently underway and will be wrapping up soon. My name is Sky Stewart, and I'm the Chief of Staff for Public Services, and I'm here with my colleague, Senior Utility Engineer Troy Boffman, and Water Treatment Services Unit Manager Molly Makieski is joining us remotely from a regional board meeting of the American Water Works Association. Troy and I will provide an overview of the studies and provide some high-level findings, and then Troy, Molly, and I will be available to answer any questions following our presentation. All right. In 2024, the city kicked off 2 studies, one water, one sanitary, the Water Distribution Plan Update, and the Sanitary Sewer Collection System Comprehensive Plan. The goals were to understand the necessary improvements for long-term performance and resiliency of each system, update the working hydraulic models for both systems, and inform planning and operations, and develop a roadmap for guiding needed investments. We hired a consultant team, OHM Advisors, to partner with us on this effort, and these studies are nearing completion, and we expect to have the final reports delivered later this spring, early summer, by the end of the fiscal year. It's important to recognize that there are multiple components of our water utility systems, and they each have different constraints. We will walk through each stage of the system, identify some of the anticipated capacity limitations. We will then discuss some next steps. As a refresher, here are the components or the stages of the water and sanitary utility infrastructure that we will be reviewing. First, we'll begin at the source. Where does our drinking water come from? Primarily the Huron River, but also supplemented by groundwater wells near the airport. We pipe this raw water to the water treatment plant, where we treat millions of gallons of water per day to high regulatory drinking water standards. And the plant also operates the lab that conducts hundreds of tests daily on drinking water to ensure that it meets those standards. Next, that treated water is piped through our water distribution system, a network of more than 465 miles of pipes, as well as storage tanks and pump stations throughout the city to get that water to homes and businesses across the city for it to be used. And drinking and cooking and laundry and dishwashing and showering and all the ways. Once that water is used, most of that water ends up back in the sanitary collection system, another network of more than 360 miles of pipes, as well as lift stations that collect and convey all of that wastewater to the water resource recovery facility, where that wastewater is treated before ultimately being returned back to the Huron River. So that's the system that we'll talk through. We'll talk through each of those components. The water system serves not just the users within the city limits, but also serves a service area that extends beyond into Ann Arbor Township and into Scioto Township. And on the sanitary side, it also extends beyond the city limits into Scioto Township, Ann Arbor Township, and into parts of Pittsfield Township. As I mentioned, the studies began back in 2024, but they had been planned for prior in the city's capital investment plan, CIP. But on a separate but parallel track, the planning department and the city's planning commission had embarked on an effort to update the city's comprehensive land use plan. And as the land use plan discussions evolved, there was an increased interest in the available infrastructure capacity as it related to future growth potential in the city. And this alignment was fortuitous because it allowed the project team, our project team, to have more robust information about where future flow and capacity is likely to be needed. And we were able to use that for modeling purposes. So ultimately, what are the limits to the utilities? So to understand how much we can densify or grow within our utility systems, we need to understand the limits to each of those components. And ultimately, the limits will vary by systems, and some of those limits are interrelated. And assessing the capacity also varies by system. So for instance, the water distribution system, the capacity is assessed by water pressure ranges and fire flow. For the sanitary collection system, the capacity is assessed differently under dry weather conditions versus wet weather conditions, and by the ability to pass like a certain design storm. And both systems need to evaluate capacity in terms of treatment plant processing rates and storage. So, to find these limits, we needed to build a model. And first, we needed to come up with a common unit of measurement. And so that common unit of measurement is the residential equivalent unit. And it doesn't just mean housing. It could mean housing, but it represents an amount of anticipated flow. It could estimate housing units or hotel rooms or restaurants or office buildings or U of M facilities or people even. So a single-family home could be 1 REU. A bowling alley and restaurant could be 20 REUs. A grocery store could be 30 REUs. A retail store could be 6 REUs. Then we wanted to understand existing conditions. In our conversations with our planning colleagues, in recent years, we've seen around 600 additional new units created in the last few years, on average. So we were thinking about, okay, if we were going to push the system, what happened if we doubled that or tripled that for 20 years out? What would happen? So we ultimately decided to triple this amount for 20 years to see what it would do to our system. So we modeled a scenario of 1,800 additional REUs per year for 20 years. And we took those flows, we modeled those flows, and they were distributed using the new land use map. So the largest flows went into the future hub, and then into the transition, and then sprinkle the new additional flows, like the smallest amount, into the residential. So just to be clear, we are not saying this is Ann Arbor's target growth rate. It's not. It's just merely an engineering exercise to better understand capabilities and limitations of our utility systems. So with that, I'll hand it over to Troy.
Thank you, Sky. Good evening, everyone. As Sky indicated, my name is Troy Boffman. I've been managing the utility comp plan effort for the city. Before we get into details, I want to orient you to the available capacity table at the top left of the slide. We will see a version of this table on subsequent slides, so I wanted to get you oriented with that. So the first column represents, do we have sufficient capacity in this component of the utility system today? The second column, do we have sufficient capacity in this part of the existing system for the modeled scenario? And as a reminder, what Sky mentioned, the modeled scenario is 1,800 additional REUs each year for 20 years. And then finally, the third column, do we have sufficient capacity beyond the 20-year period? A bit of background on the city's source water supply. We currently get about 85% of our source water from the Huron River. The remaining 15% comes from groundwater wells out near the airport. And I'd like to note that the city has been looking at options for diversifying our source water from a resiliency standpoint, which could ultimately lead to additional supply for helping out the future growth if needed. Getting back to the engineering analysis that was performed by our team, our current water supply would be sufficient to sustain such an aggressive growth trend for the 20-year period. However, this is subject to increasing pipe capacity from our existing well fields down at the airport to the water plant. That's the pipeline that takes the groundwater well water to the plant for treatment. We've been planning to upsize that pipe for a number of years. We have projects in our CIP, our capital improvements plan, but not all of that pipe has been upsized, so there'd be more to do. Next, we'll talk about the constraints of our water source. First is the river. We can only draw so much water from the river, and the analysis performed assumed that we max that out. And then second is our existing groundwater well field near the airport. The engineers, we're currently assessing our existing well capacity out there, but we think it'll be very unlikely to get more water out of those wells. So that is the constraint for the water supply. The next component I'm going to dive into is our water treatment facility. Although the source water was found to be adequate to support the modeled scenario, our water treatment plant does have limitations on how much water can be treated and distributed to our customers. As shown on the slide, our plant has a rated capacity of about 47 million gallons per day. And on a typical average day, we're not even using half that. It means we have plenty of capacity to support future growth at this time. But when we assess capacity and the ability to support future growth, we look at a max day situation. This max day situation is a scenario where it's the middle of the summer, everyone's watering lawns, using their showers, washing dishes, and we even have a fire in the system. This is a very conservative look, but we are required by our regulators to have the necessary capacity for this max day type situation. This is just an example of how careful we, the utility engineers, are as we plan for the future. Speaking of constraints for the water treatment plant, there's really no room for expansion. As I'm sure you're aware, our plant is surrounded by houses, which prevents us from expanding the plant's footprint. So getting back to the modeled scenario, our analysis showed that we'd be okay to sustain the aggressive growth trend for about 19 years, but not beyond that. Please be aware that just the planning phase of expanding not only our source water, but as well as our capacity at the water treatment plant takes many years, perhaps even a decade, if not longer. So moving forward, it's going to be very important that we monitor our growth trends and have a plan ready to go when and if it ever comes to the point where we're going to be needing additional capacity. I'd also like to point out that although the intent of the utility studies was to focus more on capacity and growth, we all know that the plant is very old and something needs to be done with it. So planning for replacing portions of the plant is already underway with an estimated completion target of 2035. And this effort is really just to maintain the current capacity we have there today. Moving on to the pipes. So the water distribution system, this is the network of pipes that takes the treated water from the plant and distributes and delivers it to our customers within our service area. Our current system has plenty of capacity to support future growth, but without making significant investments, it would not be able to support or sustain that aggressive modeled scenario we looked at for a 20-year period. However, I do want to point out the modeled scenario, we had to make a lot of assumptions on where such growth would occur, and the capital investments is very heavily dependent on the intensity and location of such development within our service area. So moving forward, it's important to continue to monitor the growth trends within the service area, as well as University of Michigan growth, so proper planning can be achieved to implement capital improvements as needed. On a side note, the final report will also lay out a number of projects that really are just kind of related around enhancing the functionality of the distribution system, which we plan to program into our CIP later in the year. All right, now we're going to switch from talking about the drinking water system to our sanitary sewer system. Our engineers broke down our sanitary system into 3 zones, as shown on the screen. While there is some interconnection, the zones function more or less independently of each other. The first being the North District, which is the area of town north of the Huron River. The West District, which includes the west side of town and the majority of our downtown area. And then the South District, representing the southern half of the city. These districts, for the most part, act independently from each other, and their ability to support future growth varies between districts, which I'll get into shortly. All right, although the city has 2 separate sewer systems, one for stormwater, one for sanitary sewer, the sanitary sewer system is heavily impacted when it rains. During a rain event, rainwater and even rising groundwater tends to find its way into our pipes and into our sanitary system, which often can overwhelm the sewers. As long as it doesn't rain, which is what we mean when we say dry weather, our current sanitary collection system, we have plenty of capacity to support growth for the 20-year period and even beyond. Our data has shown that after a major storm event, up to 50% of the flow in our sanitary pipes is actually clean rainwater. So as we assess the available capacity of our sanitary sewer system, it's very important that we keep this in mind. Because if we don't, this is what could happen. Our system can get overwhelmed, leading to sanitary sewer overflows and/or basement backups. So getting back to that map showing the 3 districts, I'll talk about each district separately here. First, the North District, which is a reminder, it's north of the river. We have plenty of capacity on that side of town to support this 20-year modeled scenario and even beyond that. The West District, which also encompasses the majority of the downtown, we do have current capacity constraints in that district, but once the sewer improvement project that is currently under construction on First Street is completed, we expect to have the available capacity to support the modeled scenario, with the exception, there's likely some modest local improvements that will need to be done depending on where the growth occurs within that district. And then the last district is the South District. This district has the most limited capacity at the moment, and the engineering team has been carefully evaluating this area as we anticipate the final report. We'll be recommending a major capacity improvement project within this district. Further discussions will be had once these recommendations become available. I'm almost there. The final component of the utility system is our wastewater treatment plant. Dry weather capacity is not a concern similar to the collection system, but we are limited with the wet weather capacity. In order to support the modeled scenario for a 20-year period, we would have to make significant investments at our plant. This would likely be constructing an additional treatment train at the plant and finding a location for a large storage tank facility that would capture the peak storm event flows and store them temporarily so the plant can properly treat the sewage and discharge it back to the Huron River. Speaking of the constraints, the plant has limitations on the volume and the rate of sewage that can be processed during a heavy rain event, as well as site expansion is limited, but some modifications out there are possible. The site has a little bit more room to work with than our water treatment plant. I could go on all evening talking about this, but now I'm going to turn it back over to Sky.
Don't go far. There's going to be questions, I'm sure. All right, so key takeaways. There is room for growth. The most pressing constraint in the sanitary collections is the sanitary collection system in the southeast part of the city, and that we will need to deal with that to be able to unlock the density envisioned in the land use plan in this area. And that we'll either need to increase the capacity or restore the capacity in that area. Depending on the intensity of growth, there are going to be long-term needs in source water, water treatment, distribution system, wastewater treatment, depending on how significant the growth is. The final report is going to be coming later this spring, and that will have very specific recommendations about projects and timing, which ones should happen no matter what, and which ones might be targeted only if certain development happens or at a certain intensity. So again, some of those recommendations, as Troy mentioned, we will want to go ahead and program into the CIP because we're going to want to do them no matter what, and others have been identified and as a potential future project, and we can take more of a wait-and-see approach. This has been a really important exercise for us because it not only tells us what part of our systems are constrained, but also directs our attention to sort of what needs to continue to be monitored within the utility systems so that we can advance those capital investments as needed to support future development. So with that, we can open to questions you might have.
Questions? Councilmember Ackman.
Thanks for the presentation. I always learn a lot. How does the growth of the university figure into your calculations? So for example, I think you put a number up there that is our most recent growth rate in the residential units. Does that include the university or not? And how much insight do we have into their anticipated growth? And I'm guessing it's not just units of dormitory housing, but it's other expansions too.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the estimated new units, that did not include U of M, but we have been in contact with U of M as part of the broader conversation, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, as part of our engagement activity, we spoke a lot with the university. We heavily leaned on their 2050 campus plan, but I believe, as we all know, the plan doesn't really give like a population or a student increase, so we had to make a lot of assumptions based on the university. So a lot of the improvements that we've identified and some of these constraints, I mean, it's going to be very important that we follow the university closely and see where their growth plans move ahead. You're welcome.
Councilmember Dish.
Thank you. This was informative. I'm interested, I'm intrigued by the ratio of the current average day to the current max day. It's almost double. And I know that other communities start actively conserving to bring down these max day numbers. Have we thought about working on conservation. You mentioned people water during the day. Well, can they not water? Can they have more drought-resistant plants? Because, of course, we have the monsoon season in Ann Arbor, followed by the drought season. That's our summer. So you kind of need both. But, yeah, I'm wondering about how much we can do with some public education around how to conserve a bit, because it seems like there's room for that, looking at those numbers. But what do you see when you look at those numbers? Because I don't know what I really see.
Do we want to see if Molly wants to jump in? I assume Molly might want to jump in, but you go ahead.
Yeah, and I will say, like, looking at the numbers, I wish our engineering team was here because they have looked at all the numbers. But yeah, I mean, they look to establish the max day kind of demand. They look back at actual usage. So if Ann Arbor over time, that max usage goes down, that would be reflective kind of in the standard that we got to be held to with our regulatory partner.
I can't actually see if Molly is here, so I'm not sure. Let's see.
Sorry, I was asking, I was speaking with Ms. Boudry about something else as well.
Oh, okay.
Molly is only available on phone, so
Okay.
I think I can allow her to talk.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like we'll be able to see her.
Okay, if she
I believe she's available now.
would like to speak to conservation efforts.
Molly, can you
Hi,
hear us?
can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful, great. Getting internet connection at hotels seems to be much more challenging than I thought it should be. So conservation is typical for us to see double our average day for max day use. That's sort of typical in the sector. But we certainly, can look into, what we could do. We've already seen a lot of conservation efforts take place, and so we haven't ever had to issue water use restrictions, but it's certainly something that we could look into.
Councilor Dish? Thank you. Councilmember Malik?
Well, first, thank you for this presentation. It's been clear to me from past conversations with Ms. Maciejewski at the water treatment plant, Mr. Sanders at the water resources recovery plant, and not part of this presentation, but Ms. Lawson is part of the stormwater utility, that we do fantastic work at the city. We are often far ahead of problems facing surrounding communities and peer communities across the country, including, iron pipes, of which it is my understanding that we have none in the city, and things like treating PFAS and things like that. So the fact that we are looking 20 years ahead and planning now for these, potential growth and things like that is fantastic, and I want to commend all of the team that did this work, because this is tremendous. It's a big lift, but you are setting the city up for long-term success. My question is, as part of the comprehensive land use planning process, we often heard a lot about new developments paying into the system, the capital cost recovery charge. Some of the numbers mentioned for upgrading, the water distribution system, potentially like $70 million for some of the costs, if I'm remembering correctly, if I'm getting the numbers right. Can you just talk a little bit about how the capital cost recovery charge works and how new developments pay into the system, that it won't be just existing payers paying and, upgrading all of these costs, paying to upgrade these?
Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do that? Go ahead. Okay. Yes, so the capital cost recovery is a tool that the city uses for new users to buy into the system, right? So we talked about all those different components of the utilities, and so someone comes in and other people have been paying for the treatment plant and the public works to maintain those pipes and to repair those pipes, and so we have this mechanism to have people buy in and sort of pay their share. So that exists, and as part of this study, they are going to be evaluating whether there needs to be, well, there's going to be another study that's going to determine if there needs to be adjustments to the capital cost recovery formula overall. I guess what I would say is that if there are investments that need to be made in the existing system, those would be shared with existing users and new users in the capital cost recovery charge. If the investments are needed only to support new growth, that is where we would need to have some broader conversations with council, and we will have some recommendations in these studies about financing options for that, because they're just a little more challenging. I guess there will be more information in the report talking about financing options for fully funded new growth related investments, if that helps.
That is helpful.
Okay.
And I look
Is there
forward to
anything
it.
else you would add to that? Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just click forward, click back.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Jennifer Hall, Ann Arbor Housing Commission. I'm going to do a little overview of our agency and then talk about how the HUD proposed president's budget could impact our agency and the community. And then I'm going to invite Wanisha Brand, our Deputy Director, up to talk about some specific programming. So just to remind folks, we own and manage apartments, over 600. We're the largest voucher program in our county as well as Monroe County. We have two programs, a family self-sufficiency and home ownership program that Wanisha will go into a little more depth. And to my colleagues in public services who manage the infrastructure, we are part of the problem as we are trying to get development done. We have 741 units that are under development since 2021 with over $355 million in development costs. The city's portion is roughly probably 18 to 20% of those total development costs. So the president introduced a budget for HUD, which is the primary source of funding that we have to run our programs. There was actually a slight increase in the funding for our Housing Choice Voucher program. And it probably won't impact us if that's the amount that gets adopted because of the increase in rent that happens each year. We'll probably serve the same number of people. We've been asked by HUD not to lease up any new units, and so we're roughly staying the same other than when we lose people who leave the program. The proposal includes elimination of block grant and home funds, which the city has, but it's administered through the county. So that's roughly $3.5 million in this current fiscal year. Elimination of the family self-sufficiency program, and elimination of the continuum of care program. So our county receives a little over $7 million annually for homeless housing and services. The Housing Commission does not receive funds directly, but we do partner with our nonprofits to provide services at a number of the housing that we own where we house homeless households. I should add that what the president has proposed does not mean it's legally binding. It does not mean this is what will get adopted because it still has to go through the appropriations process, which is done by the legislative body. The president also proposed some new program rules. In addition to not issuing new vouchers, there is an exception. One is for homeless vets through the VASH program, and one for family unification vouchers, which I'll show you what the impact is. And a brand new requirement is that all households will have to work. Every adult over the age of 18 and less than 62 will have to work 20 hours a week minimum. with some exceptions. If you have someone with a disability, or you take care of somebody with a disability, veterans in treatment, then that would not apply to you as an individual in the household. And brand new would be a time limit of 5 years. We don't know how this is going to get implemented. We don't know if it will be implemented because no specific regulations have been adopted. With the discontinuation of the continuum of care program, the president has proposed that the continuum of care funds actually get shifted to the emergency shelter grant program, which is a program that only pays for shelters and transitional housing. It does not pay for what we call permanent supportive housing, and that is 95% of our funds currently in the continuum of care program are for permanent supportive housing with services. So this is a map of where our vouchers are currently used in Washtenaw County. There's roughly a little less than 100 in Monroe County and a few in Western Wayne. So you can see of the over 2,300 vouchers, the ones that would be preserved to be able to continue to lease up would be the 278 VASH and the 32 family unification. So roughly 300 of those would be able to continue to lease up to new households. So we did a quick analysis. It's going to take a lot of digging, and I don't want to spend that much time of my staff's time until we know what the rules are, but just a quick analysis of our households. You can see here, most of our households do have somebody who has a disability. Most of our households have a disability or are elderly, but about 36% of our households could be impacted by the 5-year limit based on the age of their household members and the fact that no one in their household has a disability. On the continuum of care side, we are currently in a lot of legal battles. When I say we, those of us who receive funding in communities, not the Housing Commission per se. In 2026, the President and HUD proposed limiting all continuum of care funding, or limiting continuum of care funding to 30% of the total going to permanent housing. As I think I mentioned, 95% of our funding currently goes to permanent housing. So if this proposal continues, and if the 27 proposal is passed with zero funding, that is over 600 households who were previously homeless that are currently being housed that would lose both their rent subsidy as well as their services. So that's going to add a significant amount of homeless households to the community. We've been having a lot of conversations with the county because this is a county-wide issue. And they recently approved a short-term funding loans to our local nonprofits who have had their grants for the current year held up. Because of all the legal issues that are going on, but they have grant renewals that have not been paid out yet. And so the county approved $432,000 to pay for those services and rental subsidy. But it's the next quarter, starting July 1st through September, that is multiple millions of dollars. The largest number of our grants are renewed during that time. And so we're having a lot of conversations with our nonprofit partners, with the county, about how can we strategize to make sure we both don't lose that much funding in our community, but continue to serve homeless households. So there are a couple agencies that are looking into strategies to do sheltering and transitional housing, which we need as well as permanent housing. So we will see where that ends up at. I cannot tell you what's going to happen. It could be different tomorrow. It could be different in a month. I'm going to shift to talk about some good news, which is the amount of projects that are being funded right now with the millage, affordable housing. So we have 199 apartments that are occupied and online. We have over 1,000 that are under development. So we have those listed right there, and just to let folks know that our next project project that you will see activity on is 350 South 5th. We are hoping to close this June or July at the latest, so you will see some activity there, which is our biggest apartment complex we've done ever, and one of the biggest in the city since the 1960s. So that's 330 apartments. All of them will have affordability restrictions with permanent restrictions. So I want to thank City Council and the Mayor for your support in making this happen. I would like to introduce Wanisha Brand to talk about some specific programs. She is our expert on regulations. When I come up with crazy ideas, she's the one that makes sure that we can implement them. So she's going to talk about a couple programs.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, everyone. This year, the fiscal year 26 Housing Eviction Prevention Program, we collectively decided to roll this program out a little bit later in the year. According to the information that you see on the screen, we received not $296,000. We spent roughly 98% of those funds directly on program assistance for our families. We limited the amount of assistance to participating households to $3,000. We received 228 applications where 204 applications were approved. Of those 204 applications, roughly 98% of those applicants had their entire balance paid off within that $3,000 amount. The majority of households that we assisted were headed by Black females. However, 57% included households with children and 38% included disabled households. I want to talk about our Family Self-Sufficiency Program for a bit. This is the program that Jennifer mentioned earlier. We've managed this program for about 15 years now, and on average, we have 115 participants participate in the FSS program every year. The FSS program is a self-sufficiency program extension of our public housing project-based voucher and housing choice voucher program, where we provide support services to the families that are enrolled in the FSS program. Each program participant is allowed to participate in the program for up to 5 years, and they qualify for a 2-year extension. What happens in the FSS program, as the individual enrolls in the program, the goal is to increase their earned income. As they increase their earned income, the housing assistance payment is decreased, and the difference between what we previously paid and what we currently pay now is placed into an escrow savings account. On average, graduates of the program have exited or graduated from the FSS program with an average of about $10,000. We partner with a number of nonprofits in the community. Some of our larger partners, specifically for the FSS program, is Michigan Works, Habitat for Humanity, Bank of Ann Arbor, University Lending, and Huntington Bank, as well as the Office of Community and Economic Development. That is the end of our slide, and we're open for questions.
Thank you so very much, Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you for your presentation. I just had a question about the NED vouchers. So you guys had about 351 NED vouchers. Are those the vouchers that do not have a work requirement attached?
Not currently.
Currently, none of our vouchers have a work requirement attached.
Well, with the proposed
changes, HUD has been silent in regards to the non-elderly disabled vouchers. However, to qualify for a non-elderly disabled voucher, there has to be a disabled member in the household, that disabled member would qualify for an exemption.
Okay, so
But if they have multiple people between the age of 18 and 62, potentially it would impact other people
Other
in their
members,
household.
correct.
It would impact, you saying?
It may.
Okay. But on its face, if somebody has a NED voucher, essentially they would qualify for that exemption?
That's correct.
Okay. Then really quickly, just thank you. One other question. So you said about 98% of the applicants had all of their past due rent covered for the eviction prevention?
Yes.
So for the 2% that didn't, did you all, I'm curious, are you guys still providing the $3,000 to individuals who, let's say somebody had a larger balance than $3,000? What were you all, tell me about what.
Yes.
Yes, like what you did to, do they have to bring their funds from somewhere else? I'll let you talk.
Yes, so that's exactly what we did. We made sure that we communicated with the local community partners, nonprofit agencies, to explain exactly what the program requirements were. And in addition to that, we educated not just our participants, but also the landlords in the community. So we tried to communicate as best as we could. Therefore, when the applicant placed an application, if their balance was over $3,000, we informed them at that time that we're processing applicants on a first-come, first-served basis. And if they were able to obtain the funds either by way of a promise to pay from another agency, or they were able to pay for the funds themselves, because this program has been going on for a couple of years, we had a lot of landlords that said, hey, we got the funds, or, yep, we had the promise to pay. Can you go ahead and release payment? And we were able to do that without a formal receipt in a lot of instances, and just the promise to pay for a number of the program participants.
So if you had somebody that applied early on, like they were the first, within the first, I don't know if it was like 200, and they did not have the rest of the balance, how would you handle that individual? Would they still have their place in line if they were one of the first to apply, and then they still have to, if they have to go and find the funds to match that, or to meet if they had a $6,000 balance, right? They would have to go find another $3,000.
Yes.
Did they keep their place in line, or?
No, they do not keep their place in line. However, we did communicate with them at least 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes within the 2 weeks, because we continue to have funds available. So as long as we had funds available, we continued to reach out to either the participant or the landlord to inquire and update what the status of the application was in terms of them being able to obtain the additional funding. And as long as they were able to, we were able to process those individuals. The ones that were denied essentially were not able to obtain the additional funds because their balances were so high.
Okay, so you have expended all of those funds already?
We have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Watson.
Is it possible for you guys to, thank you for the presentation. The work that the Housing Commission is doing is always really inspiring. Are you able to bring back, I think, the 4th slide in your presentation on the voucher program?
I can't tell which one that's it.
Do you mean the map?
Yeah, the map. Sorry. So people often have questions about vouchers issued by the Housing Commission being used outside the city of Ann Arbor. But I'm correct in understanding that the Ann Arbor Housing Commission is one of, if not the only, HUD designated issuer of vouchers for the county. So if someone in Saline wanted to get a voucher, is their only option to go through the Housing Commission? Can you explain a little bit? Because I think there's sometimes a confusion, even though there's Ann Arbor in the name, this is the one entity, right?
I got it. You go ahead. So there's actually 3 housing authorities that service Washtenaw County: Plymouth Housing Commission, MISTA, and the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. We all service Washtenaw County, but Ann Arbor Housing Commission is the only one that's located inside the city of Ann Arbor.
Okay. So, but I guess, right, so one of the reasons that the vouchers are used outside the city of Ann Arbor is due to the cost of rent in Ann Arbor, but another reason is that there's not, for example, the smaller municipalities don't have their own housing commission.
This is correct.
Yes, okay. So I think that sometimes clears up some confusing people have. I also wanted to ask about the eviction prevention, or I wanted to clarify a couple of things. So this is eviction prevention funds for FY26. That was eviction prevention funds allocated through the marijuana excise tax rebate and through the general fund. This reported eviction prevention funding does not include any of the funds from Rising Hope for Housing. That program has eviction prevention, but this is not.
That's correct.
Yes. So the area code breakdown shows, or the zip code breakdown shows where they were used, but they were all within, that program is limited to the city of Ann Arbor.
That's correct.
Yes. And so, yeah, just to remind people, yeah, the 160,000 in general fund money came through our Federal Administration Impact Fund. So that was general fund, but it was one-time money. And then I guess just also on the issue of the federal funding, we saw Congress, were some of these, Trump's recommended budget for FY26 was a lot harsher than what was adopted, correct? So I guess I don't want to be too rosy on some things, but it is certainly possible that Congress sort of bucks Trump's recommendation as they did last year. Like, could you comment just on what his recommendation was for FY26, if you recall? Just broad strokes, I mean, because...
The president's budget for fiscal year 26 was a 44% cut across the board, and what ended up getting adopted was about, I think it was 4 or 5 or maybe 6% increase in the budget once it got to Congress. And he had also proposed that only 30% of COC funding could be used for permanent housing, and Congress increased that to 60% could be used for permanent housing, and that's still in the court system right now.
So I guess there's two ways to read that, but he almost recommended quadruple the decrease, but maybe now, and he actually got the opposite of that, he got an increase, but now it looks like he's recommending something that maybe he's doing that because he thinks it's more realistic, but you could also see Congress just going a different way. Finally, I just wanted to note, because it's not administered by the Housing Commission, the CDBG grant funding that's at risk from the federal cuts, the city of Ann Arbor uses that funding for, or it is the only place that we fund CAN, Community Action Network, and Peace Neighborhood Center. So I just want people to know that every year we set aside those two fundees as the only community development organizations in the city of Ann Arbor, and a lot of that money is used for infrastructure in those areas, but that's the only place that we support CAN and Peace in the CDBG funds. That would be a risk.
If I could add, they are the only CHODOs.
CHODOs, yeah.
But we also provide funds through the mental health millage for where they are our service provider at our properties, separate from the other funding.
Right. I guess I was going to, yeah, so if we cut CDBG, those two would be very much at risk, specifically.
Thanks. Other questions? It's a lot going on in uncertainty, but I'm grateful for your work and help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last two presentations, first will be the SEU. You've been hearing us talk about the sequencing of activities to stand up the utility in calendar year 2026. We're at a point now where we want to talk to you about rate setting and what that looks like. So Shoshana Linsky, our SEU director, will lead that. There are a team of people supporting that will be available. And then following that will be the discussion about the Downtown Development Authority's potential service team project. So.
Thank you. Good evening, council members.
Before I dive in, I'm just going to say a happy birthday to the Ann Arbor Sustainable Energy Utility, which turned 1 year old today. And speaking as both a resident, and I sort of like to think of myself as the adoptive mom of the SCU, thank you for your vision and leadership that brought this into being a year ago today and for supporting it over the last year. We had some cupcakes in here earlier. So let me set the stage for what I'll share tonight. First, I just want to dive in with a little bit of important sort of background and status updates and insights into sort of how we've been thinking strategically about these pilot deployments for the SEU. And then I'll dive into more specific details on how we developed and what we are proposing for 2 sets of pilot rates, and that is for the Bryant neighborhood and for our municipal assets. So for our current update, we are on the cusp, within days, probably as many as I can count on my 2 hands at least, of beginning our first system installations and turning into a true operating utility. There have been so many little milestones that it's taken to get to this moment, lining up all the dominoes to sort of be ready to go. That includes things that you have seen, right, and voted on, and thank you for those authorizations, right, acquiring our major equipment, our solar panels and our batteries. And we've been working with our installation contractors to set up processes with them. The way that the SEU is asking them to operate is differently than sort of what they're used to when they're building residential solar. We've been developing processes, enrolling our first customers. As of this afternoon, we have our first 11 residents who have officially signed on the dotted line to join the SEU. We've developed forms and issued regulations, which you saw at the last meeting on the agenda. And then, as you heard Administrator Dohoney present at the last meeting where he introduced the proposed FY 2027 budget, should you approve that on July 1st, the SEU will have an enterprise fund and a budget and assets. And that will be critical to allowing us to borrow, right, and to grow, to serve residents and expand our offerings throughout the city. It also will mean that we can start receiving revenue from rates. And so tonight we are here to recommend our rates. And tonight is the preview, and then on the May 4th and 18th agendas, you will see the official rate ordinance, and they would become effective on July 1st. So the rates that I'm going to share tonight are for 2 special pilot services, and I want to be really clear that these rates are not applicable across the city. People should not be looking to these as an indication of what rates will look like as we're able to expand our services outside of these pilots. And the common factor for these 2 pilots really is that they're what we might call sort of bring your own solar, in the sense that in all these cases we have grant capital that's paying for the actual assets, right, and not SEU dollars, not financing them. So we are essentially covering like the operations and the maintenance and the long-term ownership of these assets. But that means they're not rates that will be replicable for systems where we actually have to come and build it using SEU financing. I know that folks all across the city, and you are eager to know what those rates will look like for general services. Having now developed our pilot rates, that is what we are turning our attention to next. It will be a big focus over the course of the summer, and so I anticipate we'll return to you with those proposals in the early fall timeframe. Before we dive further into the rates, I just want to acknowledge that what I'm sharing tonight has been a huge team effort. Last fall, we issued an RFP for a rate firm and selected a team of consultants from Exeter Associates and from Ricardo to help us, and they bring a mix of utility finance and rate making, and then this really technical renewable energy expertise that has been really helpful for our very, very unique project here. And I also want to acknowledge that the work has been in close collaboration, of course, with the city's attorney's office, with Valerie Jackson, with our outside counsel, Valerie Brader, both of whom are here, with the city finance team, including our CFO. So what you'll see here is the result of a team effort. And with that, I believe that we have the 2 leads for our consulting firm, Brendan and Kyle, online this evening. And if it's possible to pull them up as presenters, I wanted to just have them introduce themselves for a quick moment here. And they will be online to assist with Q&A afterward.
They're both joining us now on Zoom.
Excellent. Brendan, why don't you go ahead first?
Sure. Good evening, Council. I'm Brendan Larkin Connolly. I'm a managing consultant at Exeter Associates. Exeter is a Maryland-based consulting firm who works a lot with utility consumer advocates, public utility commissions, and other public agencies advising on rate design, regulatory policy, really across the country. I'm co-project manager on this project along with Kyle Levesque, who you'll see from Ricardo. I bring about over 18 years of experience in utility rate cases and expert witness testimony in multiple jurisdictions, and it's really been a privilege to support Ann Arbor with the launch of the SEU, and really looking forward to seeing them start serving the first customers in Bryant Park. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Kyle Levesque, Energy Infrastructure Lead for Ricardo. I come from 18 years background experience working in utilities, and Ricardo has worked on setting up rates for over 50 utilities across the globe, over 4 continents. We specialize specifically in battery, renewable energy transitions, and electrifications for EVs. And so really excited to be working with Ann Arbor on this, and I think this is a fantastic project.
Thank you guys very much. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so as the team began working together, we first started to prepare rates following standard cost of service-based rate making, and I know you're familiar with this from the city's other utilities, so I won't belabor the point, but for anybody who's watching who's not so familiar, the idea there is to first set what's called a revenue requirement, which is essentially how much revenue do we need to collect to cover the costs of the service that we're providing. Then those costs or those revenues get allocated to different customer groups. That might be residential and commercial customer classes, it might be a group of pilot customers, based on sort of how they actually drive those costs. And then lastly, you take those revenues that you need and you actually turn them into a rate design, which says like actually how do you collect that, the formula for how those revenues are collected. So we started down this path, and it was no surprise to any of us as we started working on this. We very quickly found that this cost-based approach was not viable for our very early days as the SEU here. It would simply put too much burden on the SEU's first customers. We have some fixed costs right now, right? Like an employee salary, for example, that if you divided it over less than 200 accounts would require monthly rates of like more than $200 per month per customer, which is simply not viable right now. However, spread over the thousands of customers that we expect to have in a few years, it is absolutely viable, and we are very confident that we will, as we grow, be able to offer rates that are both cost-based and that are competitive with the rates that folks are currently paying for electricity. So I want to be really explicit that we do anticipate getting to cost of service rates as the SEU scales, but we are proposing an alternative approach right now, and one that is not uncommon for pilots. And that is what's called a value-based rate setting. And this means that instead of asking what do we have to recover to cover our costs, we ask what is the value of the service that we are providing to participants or to the customer, and we ask them to pay rates that reflect that value and that are aligned with that value. In this case for the SEU, that value is largely from the avoided cost of purchasing electricity from the grid, so that is to say it's the energy savings on their energy bills. And this value-based approach will allow us to enroll more customers and to start collecting revenue to offset our costs, and that will allow us to scale rapidly. And as we scale, we will move closer and closer to recovering our full costs in rates, and then eventually do recover that full cost in rates. We made another important decision that I want to share with you about how we are going to bill customers for service, and that is to charge a fixed rate based on the capacity of the installed systems, rather than what's called a variable or a volumetric rate, where we would charge based on the number of kilowatt hours of energy that were generated from these systems. And ultimately, there's a number of different reasons that drove this decision. First, I actually think it is the most appropriate reflection of the actual costs, the way that that they are incurred for a business like the Sustainable Energy Utility. The cost of providing SEU service is heavily fixed. The cost of the panels, the cost of billing software, the cost of staff, and so forth does not vary with how much energy is produced by the panels. There's no fuel cost here, right? That tends to be in a utility world the major variable cost, and it simply does not apply here. The approach also allows us to avoid unnecessary metering infrastructure, not just the equipment up front and the installation of it, but all of the long-term costs associated with maintaining that infrastructure. We also believe that it supports predictable budgeting and simplified billing, and I think that's a plus for both the SEU's customers and for the SEU. Residents will know what to expect. They won't see surprises on their SEU bills, and our customer service team will not be filled in questions about complex utility bills. We all know that no matter how wonky we are and how much time we spend with our utility bills, they are never very fun to read and interpret and lead to all sorts of questions and billing complaints. The fourth advantage here is a little wonkier to explain, but it's really, really important to me and I think to what the SEU stands for, so I'm going to try. Under a variable or a volumetric rate where the SEU charged for how many kilowatt hours of solar came out of a system and were therefore purchased by the resident who has that system, we would have to set standards for whose roof was sunny enough to be allowed to participate and take service from the SEU. We would have to deny some people the right to participate. And that is because, let's say there's a system that costs $10,000 to install. On one sunny roof, it generates 5,000 kilowatt hours. On a slightly shaded roof, it's generating 3,000 kilowatt hours per year, right? If I charge them both the same rate per kilowatt hour, then either I would not recover enough from the system that is producing less because it's partially shaded, or I would have to raise rates for everybody, charging more to the customer who does have a really sunny roof to offset the lower revenue generated from the other resident's roof. And I would still have to have some kind of cutoff. Like if your system is really, really bad below X amount, I simply can't possibly serve you. But by contrast, by charging residents this capacity-based rate, we can accept anyone who wants to join regardless of how much energy their system will produce, as long as they go in informed and know what the value of that system will be to them. So again, if it's $10,000 to put it on their roof and I'm recovering, let's say, $1,000 a year from them, and for one resident that saves them 5,000 kilowatt hours that they otherwise would have had to purchase, and for the other it only saves them 3,000, the one who, is making 5,000 kilowatt hours, maybe they say, yeah, I'm actually saving money on net on my energy bills. The one with 3,000, maybe they say, well, I'm not saving money on my energy bills, but this is still really important to me to do this because I want to participate in the new community utility. I want to have green energy. And so it opens up the opportunity for anybody to participate who wants to. And that feels really important to me. The last thing here is just that with lots of vetting by attorneys and our expert consultants who you met, we're fully confident that this approach is aligned with state law on municipal utility rate making and with best practice on rate making principles. So with all of that background, I will take you to the reveal for the actual rates. All right, as we started looking at the Bryant neighborhood, it's of course our first pilot. It's critical not only to the SEU and our growth and our success, it's critical to the city, but it's really high stakes for the residents there as well. They've been waiting a long time for this and hearing about this and working with the OSI team, and so we wanted to make sure that we offer a great experience for these residents. So we identified 3 guiding principles that really actually were quite instrumental in helping us reach the rate decisions that you'll see in a moment. Those are first and foremost to offer value to participants, and that's measured largely by energy bill savings, but also by having a positive experience. Second is to be inclusive so that we can enable as many participants from the neighborhood as possible. We had some decisions where we had to make trade-offs between offering a larger benefit to a smaller number of residents or participants, or a slightly smaller benefit, but being able to share that among a wider group. And we leaned toward the latter when we had had those trade-offs to make. And then the third is that we actually just have to get this done, right? We have to make implementation, and that includes the implementation of rates, as simple and frictionless as possible, so we can get this sort of enormous undertaking done in the relatively short amount of time that we have for grant funding. So guided by those principles, we had this process of essentially iteratively modeling a range of potential system configurations, meaning what equipment we were selecting and and that people would receive. And then for those configurations, what would the value be for participants? And then based on the value, what would the rates be that we could charge? And when I say iterate, let me assure you there were a lot of iterations involved here. So we began with anonymized household energy consumption data from the neighborhood and generic solar system production estimates based on a handful of systems in the neighborhood. And the grant funding that supports this, we have enough dollars to essentially, we believe, cover about 100 to 150 households here. So we also needed to make sure that whatever system we chose to offer to them was actually a viable solution for that many. If we had a system that could only fit on 50 roofs, well, we weren't going to get 150 systems installed. So we had to make sure that it was actually going to drive uptake among that many households. And so we landed on a standard configuration of a 4.5 kW, 4.5 kilowatt solar system. That's 10 panels with a 15 kilowatt hour capacity battery. And that is sized. We believe it will fit on about 200 households' physical roof space, meet DTE's interconnection requirements for about 200 households. So we think we'll have enough sort of viable candidates from which to get that 100 to 150 installations. And there's just an example of some of the modeling we did. Okay, so what we found was that when we look at these range of home energy profiles and generic good solar generation profile in the neighborhood, we could take all 262 homes in the neighborhood and sort of model what the distribution of annual savings on their DTE energy bill could look like. And we found that before any SEU charges, most households would see a range of savings on their bill from DTE of between about $600 and $1,000 per year with that standard system configuration. And therefore, if the SEU charges rates that essentially are equivalent to about $600 per year, most residents would see some kind of net total annual energy bill savings. Some would break even, some would end up saving a few bucks, some would save a couple $100s, but there would be some value for nearly everybody who wanted to participate. So $600 per year equates to an average of $50 per month. However, solar production is highly seasonal, and we wanted to be mindful of monthly cash flows for residents here and not have them experience any couple of months where maybe they'd have $50 higher bills. We know that that's just simply not tenable for many of these. So we wanted to manage this seasonally. And we found that charging a seasonal rate of $75 per month from April to September when we have high solar production and $25 per month from October to March would really match well with that variation in solar production. So participants would see not only an average annual savings, but also they should see either break even or savings in most months. Or if there's months where they pay more, it's a couple of dollars and not $50 more in their energy bills. I want to also just mention, I'm talking a lot about sort of the dollar value savings from purchasing less energy from the grid, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the systems we're installing also include this battery backup, right, which provides a lot of resilience benefits. Those are much harder to put a dollar value on, although if anybody has ever, lost their entire freezer full of food, there is a real dollar amount to it, but it certainly can provide peace of mind and quality of life value as well. So those are the Bryant rates, that $75 per month April to September, $25 per month from October to March, and those will be described in this rate book that we have prepared. It will be published on the website. You'll see it when this comes next at the next council meeting. I just want to call out a couple quick things that are in the fine print here. Don't expect you to read it now, but when it comes for your approval, I want you to note that we're proposing to fix these rates until June 30th of 2030. So we heard from these residents that it's important to them to have some stability and know when they're signing up that we're not going to increase rates on them in the next year or two. So we want them to sign up and commit and guarantee that fixed rate until that time, and then effective July 1st, 2030, we could start adjusting rates through the usual rate adjustment process. And we have also included in these terms that these residents may terminate service with no penalty after that date of July 1st, 2030, so that if for some reason they find, if and when we adjust rates, that it no longer works for them, they know that they have an out with no penalty. So that is the Bryant rates, and I will turn now to our second set of pilot rates, which is for our municipal solar assets and solar and storage assets. As you heard at the last council meeting, the city is proposing to transfer ownership to the SEU of its grant-funded solar and solar plus storage systems that are on municipal facilities and within city limits. And this will assist the city, I hope, by ensuring that the systems are monitored and maintained for the very long term. And also having assets on our balance sheet will really be critical for helping the SEU to grow. As I shared at the beginning, you can think about these systems as kind of BYO solar, like the Bryant pilot. The SEU in this case is not having to put money down for the capital for these systems. These exist already. They were paid by grant funding. So the SEU will really only be covering the O&M for them. And so again, these are not rates that could be replicated for any other installations that would require capital costs. And as shared up front also, we're going to use the same approach for these systems of using value-based rates as opposed to cost of service rates right now, so that we don't overburden the SEU's first customers, including ourselves as the city. And we do fully intend to switch these customers over to cost-based rates as the SEU grows. So for these municipal assets, we derived their value and therefore the rates based on the cost that our city facilities would otherwise have to pay to purchase that energy from the grid. The idea here is for these systems to contribute some value-based revenue to the SCU and support the utility that the city has made a commitment to standing up, but without those facilities being sort of penalized or worse off than they would have been without the solar. So the systems in question, we did some pretty simple math up here. They produce about 1.1 million kilowatt hours of energy per year. Purchasing those from DTE would cost about 16 cents per kilowatt hour. That means that there's sort of a savings or a value there of roughly $177,000. We follow the same approach as we did in Bryant, where we're going to charge a rate based on the capacity of the installed systems. So we divide that $177,000 of value by the 1,000 kilowatts of installed capacity, which is 93% or so of solar and a little bit of storage as well, which helps optimize the use of that solar. And pretty simple math, it results in a charge of essentially $14 per kilowatt per month for each of these systems. And that is our recommended rate. And I just want to reiterate that these pilot municipal rates are truly intended to be temporary. Over the next year or two, we will be in pilot operations, right? And we will learn what it really takes to operate these systems, to maintain them. We will establish contracts to perform O&M, both preventative and reactionary maintenance on them, and we'll learn about how much of that is required and so forth. And then we will use those learnings to inform the development of cost-based rates for these systems. And last but not least, you will also see these in the formal rate sheet, which will come to you on the May 4th agenda. So that is the end of my presentation, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Buradieu.
Thank you. Really appreciated that. Obviously, as a resident in Bryant, this is something my neighbors are talking about all the time, and so I think there's a lot of excitement and just really want to express my appreciation for your work. I did have one question about kind of the rate guarantee, and is that based on address, or is that per agreement with the customer? And so if the home were to change hands, how does that work for a transfer of ownership?
The rate will be fixed for 4 years, regardless of who the resident is at that time.
Thank you.
Councilor Malik.
I echo the thanks for this presentation. It's really exciting to see this get off the ground. My question is related to several times in your presentation, you mentioned DTE. DTE's production limits, DTE's interconnection agreements.
Yeah.
Can you just explain how, it sounds like we still essentially have to operate within the system as if we were an individual residential customer installing on our own house. Can you explain just how that works with the SEU? Can we set some of our own rules now that we're our own utility, or are we just not able to do that yet? Or anything you're able to explain around that would be interesting.
Sure. Let me take the second part, which is sort of the long-term vision, is that as we grow and build out our own microgrids, we may be able to get around some of the constraints that we currently have. But that is at least a few years away. It's just a much more complex sort of technical engineering exercise as well as business model. And we really want to work first on just deploying generation, meaning getting more clean energy created in the community, right? In the short term, and quite possibly even in the long term, it's going to depend a lot on the configuration. We are bound by DTE's interconnection rules. Any system that is operating, it's called in parallel with their systems, with energy coming into the house from DTE, is required to go through interconnection. And that's a good thing. It protects, safety for line workers and everything, right? So this is not something we're trying to circumvent. It does mean that there are some limits to what can be installed. So for example, we can't put a system on somebody's home that's larger than essentially their energy needs at their facility. So they can't produce 2 or 3 times as much energy as they actually use and sell that back to the grid. We have been working very closely with DTE to prepare for this pilot and are getting some sort of assistance from them in thinking through making sure that we will have as smooth as possible an interconnection process. I fully expect there may be some bumps because it is quite a technical and lengthy process, and we're trying to do a lot in a concentrated area, which is unusual for them to experience that. But they have been partnering with us to help it go as smoothly as possible.
Great, thank you. And then I think you kind of answered this. This does mean that, for instance, all the homes and residents in the Bryant neighborhood participating in this pilot would essentially still be DTE customers, but that would be, DTE would be kind of a minimal piece of their energy needs. The SEU would be the majority. Is that correct?
It'll depend a lot house to house. So yes, everybody will remain connected to DTE. That's sort of the idea of us as a supplemental utility, is that we're not trying to cover 24/7 needs for every household. Some household, because we're putting in a single system size for the Bryant pilot, right, as a 4.5 kW system, it'll produce, depending on shading, somewhere between 3,500 kilowatt hours and about 6,000 kilowatt hours per year on any one of these households. And their usage varies from that, 2 to 3,000 to 12,000. So it'll depend a lot on the individual house. For some of them, it'll cover 90% of their use. For some, it'll cover 50% of their use. It's just going to be highly variable. But it's less energy that they'll be buying from the grid.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Councilor Bryant?
So then I think the way to think about this, if I'm understanding it correctly, it's like me getting solar for my house, except I don't have to pay for any of the equipment. The sustainable energy utility pays to install the solar. I still get a DTE bill, and it's variable dependent on how much of my needs the solar is able to cover, whether there's been snow on my panels for a month, for example, stuff like that. Is that how we should be thinking?
That's a great way to think about it,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Yep, no upfront costs, right? So we know that is one of the greatest barriers to people getting their own solar energy systems, right? Whether they have the cash in hand or the credit to be able to install it on their own. So that's one of the barriers we're trying to overcome. And then they simply pay the SEU a rate for the energy they're receiving.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Rodino.
Sorry, I do have one follow-up question.
Sure.
Because this is, the infrastructure will be owned by the SEU, what is the process for if a homeowner needs to have a roof repair or something like that and they have SEU-owned infrastructure on their property?
Yeah, So in the Bryant neighborhood, one of the things that's really amazing about what the city is able to offer is that pairing this grant that we have for solar here with some grants that the Office of Sustainability and Innovations got, we actually have funding to do roof repairs and put new roofs on homes. So if these homes that want solar through the SEU have roofs that are like older than 10 years, we're getting them a new roof before they put the solar on. So there shouldn't be any need to replace it during the life cycle. We will have for sort of the general population as they get into this, we will be encouraging people to get a new roof or have like a relatively new roof before they're putting solar on. We will be able to remove and reinstall the solar when people need to do roofing. It's done. It's not an enormous task, but there would be a cost associated with doing that.
Councilmember Dish.
I'm just following on the train of thought started by Councilmember Ackman. So the benefit is that I have no upfront cost to get the solar equipment, and then there's the added benefit that there is funding to fix my roof and other things that my house might need to be energy efficient. Yeah. That's amazing. But then so the idea is that I will pay less to DTE. Mm-hmm. And I will pay for energy to the SEU for what I'm getting for the SEU at a lower rate than I pay to DTE? Or?
Well, because it's not a variable rate, I can't tell you what the sort of cost per kilowatt hour is. I mean, we could do the math to say you're going to pay $50 a month on average or $600 a year on average, and your system is going to produce approximately this many kilowatt hours, right? It varies year to year. So we could do the math to sort of say what is your effective per kilowatt hour rate, and we're happy to do that for anyone who's interested. But the modeling that we have done, we did it both generically for the whole neighborhood to help set the rates. But now as we're signing residents up, we are actually getting their DTE bill from them, if they're willing to share it, which they all are because they want this, and getting what's called a helioscope model, where we actually put, in a software model, we put panels on their roof, and we see how much it's going to generate every single hour of the year, approximately. Again, these are all forecasts. Pair those together in a model where we can actually say, we think that you will save, let's say, $700 a year on your DTE bill, and then you'll pay $600 to the SEU. So on average, over the course of the year, most years you should be saving in that $100 range on your sort of net total energy bills or electricity bills.
Okay, that's making it very clear. So because I'm paying a fixed rate to the SEU, I don't really need to know how much I'm paying per kilowatt hour. I just need to look at the end of the year, did I end up with a little bit more in my pocket because I had clean energy for part of my energy, for which I paid a fixed cost, and that offset what I have to pay to DTE.
Yes.
Okay, and so that is the way. So I am disappointed that we can't put a larger size system on someone's roof than their use, because I was thinking that that would be one of the advantages of this system, that I have limited capacity. I have shady roof, but some of my neighbors have very sunny roofs, and if we were all interconnected, they could be producing for me too. But that's not yet where we are, and so the way in which we are pooled is through this fixed rate, that even though I'm not generating very much, I'm paying a fixed rate based on what the whole SEU is, its capacity is, which is the inclusive part of it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's great. But so how sad should I be that we can't currently put a larger size?
Only moderately sad, because it's still good to get some energy, even if it's not, as much as you would want or enough to share with neighbors.
And is there a time when we will be able to do more?
I hope so, yes. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do still to figure out exactly how that will work, but that is absolutely the hope. And we'll have energy sharing across property lines and break all the rules.
Okay. Further questions? Anna, can you talk a little bit about how storage intersects with the rate calculation, what the user's storage experience will be?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the batteries that we are installing here, they're 15 kilowatt hour capacity batteries, which means that over the course of the day, as somebody's solar system is generating more energy than they're using in their house at that moment, right? The first use of the solar energy that's generated is whatever the home loads are at that moment. Then, if there's more energy being generated, that will go into the battery until the battery fills all the way up. And these are pretty big batteries as they go, and so there's plenty of capacity to absorb the day's sunlight. And then as the sun starts going down, people come home from work, turn on all their appliances and TV, and start using more energy in the evening hours. That battery will be used and deployed to serve that home's load. So essentially, that energy from the sun that was stored during the day when it wasn't needed gets used in the evening. And these batteries are large enough that for many of these homes, that'll carry them through the night and back to the next morning when it can start charging again. So that's sort of the normal mode of operation. The SCU will control the battery's functioning and when and how it is deployed or dispatched to serve the home, and it will typically be set to just run on its own in this fashion where it optimizes the use of the solar that is produced to keep as much of that as possible being used at the home. It also has a function that's sort of for preparedness for storms. So it's actually talking directly to the National Weather Service, getting pings. Anytime there's a storm in the forecast, the battery will automatically charge up and hold its charge instead of doing its normal sort of cycling. It will hold its charge so that you have a full battery if that storm materializes and takes down the grid and there's a power outage. And then that battery, depending on the home's usage, which is highly, highly variable, and depending on the season and so forth, it might carry folks through half a day to a day of sort of their normal household energy needs. And if they conserve energy and just use critical loads, charging some cell phones, keeping your fridge going and so forth, that can last much longer than a day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
All right.
SEU, super awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get you set up here.
EDA is super awesome too. Don't get me wrong.
Thanks.
And Housing Commission and Water.
You're all awesome.
All right. You just here, forward, back.
Awesome.
Yep. And it'll stop on its own when you get
Okay. Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor, council members. It's great to be here again with you tonight. As you know, I'm Maura Thompson, and I'm joined tonight by a few of my colleagues, Amber Miller from the DDA, Monica Boot from HR, Paul Matthews from Public Works, and I know Sky and Jordan are here as well. So Amber and I both really thank all of our colleagues for working with us so closely on putting this presentation together. So I'm here tonight to talk about the Downtown Service Team pilot. And for tonight, we are looking for your feedback and direction on the preferred approach to piloting a DDA-funded downtown service team. So what I will do is run through the pilot goal, what is included in the pilot, what we hope to learn from the pilot, then present you with the two options that we're looking at, and then open it up to you all for discussion and guidance. So the pilot goal is to support and inform a long-term in-house service team, again, funded by the DDA, with full-time staff that are dedicated to proactive service and management of our downtown. And what is included in the pilot? So the pilot actually is made up of two different categories of work. The first is consolidating current DDA maintenance. So this is maintenance that the DDA is currently handling through contractors. And this is our smaller maintenance, so this is not work that's included in the CIP. It's about $200,000 a year of work. And it includes things like repairing tree grates, benches, pavers, some minimal landscaping. The second category of work is, I think, what most of us are thinking about when we're thinking about this downtown service team. And this is the DDA expanding its role into service. So this is taking on tasks that we currently don't manage. So we're talking about cleaning our sidewalks, expanding our role in landscape maintenance to really get to all of that weeding that's needed downtown, to operating bollards. Now that you all have passed our plan, we are moving forward with our retractable bollard project. We need someone to operate those bollards. It's clearing snow from key locations. And what are we hoping to learn from the pilot? Why are we doing this pilot? So the program scope right now includes a wide range of services. It is a very broad scope. Our intention with this pilot is to go through the program for 12 months and figure out what belongs in this program and what doesn't. There may be things that we have in the scope of service that we realize don't make sense. There may be things that we have missed. So with that refined scope, we will then be able to look at the job descriptions and make sure that we have a job description that's actually accurately reflecting exactly what those job duties are. In turn, we will be able to look at staffing levels to make sure we have optimal staffing, and then look at hours of operation. We know that there is a seasonality to this work. We feel like we need to go through those 4 seasons to really determine what are the optimal hours of operation. And in terms of long-term equipment needs, for this first year, we are going to go kind of light and flexible on the equipment, given that the program scope, we are testing the scope. We do not want to make major capital investments in equipment until we have that scope really refined. So before you tonight, we have 2 pilot options. We have a pilot with block by block. What we know from the service block by block offers throughout the country is we believe their strength lies in their ability to be flexible and to flexibly deploy. Our second option is a pilot with our own Public Works Department. We know with the good work that they do, we believe their strength lies in the maintenance. Both are capable of testing these pilot services. So in exploring the options, we have determined that with both options, there would be a dedicated staff team and supervisor. Both offer workforce development, and in response to what we heard from you all last April, in terms of it being very important that these positions had union representation, block by block, should we go with them, they have agreed to adding language to a contract to say that they would not oppose a petition should employees choose to form a union. Oh, didn't mean to do that, sorry. Scope of services, both are capable of testing the entire scope. Both fall within the DDA's budget. With both options, we are committed to working with AFSCME on informing the long-term program. But the key difference is the time to implementation. With block by block, the estimate is 4 months. With Public Works, the estimate is 12 months. And this is just a personal opinion. I think these are optimistic estimates. We all have a lot on our plate as staff. Summertime is coming. People do have to live their lives and take vacation. I personally think those are optimistic, but maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. So to cost in a summary. So we are not comparing apples to apples when we're looking at these programs. We did the best we could to give you the best comparison we could. With block by block, we are purchasing hours, and we would be purchasing about 17,000 hours. We were able to translate the Public Works plan into hours, and it equates to about 14,000 hours. In terms of positions, with block by block, we would have 1 supervisor, 6 full-time employees, and 2 seasonal. With Public Works, we would have 1 Teamster represented supervisor and 6 full-time AFSCME employees. For labor and benefits cost, block by block is about $635,000, Public Works about $775,000. Overhead, it's basically the same. Office rent, with block by block, we would be required to rent office space. We're estimating about $50,000 a year. We won't have that cost with Public Works. They would be at Wheeler. So your overall total, you're comparing $834,000 with block by block to $930,000 with Public Works. In terms of equipment, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of going light on the first year. With block by block, they have a amortized purchase arrangement with Public Works. We would lease in the first year. We would not purchase. We still have work to do on finalizing those costs. Right now, when we're looking at them, it looks like it's pretty even. So now to process and implementation, and this is where we see the difference. So for Public Works, it's really important to point out that, we don't have this program in place here at the city. So we basically have to get the internal structure in place before we can launch a pilot. So looking at this timeline, you can see if we were to start in May, we have about 6 weeks until about mid-June where we would be working on job descriptions, both between DDA and Public Works, and then HR doing the work they need to do. AFSCME then has 13 weeks to review those descriptions and work on pay progressions and give feedback. After that, HR would be working with AFSCME on the collective bargaining agreement alignment. So that brings us to, mid-December. At that time, when those meetings are finalized, we would be able to post the job description. HR would be able to do their recruiting and onboard. So we would be looking at having a team up and running probably about this time next year with this timeline. At the same time that all of this is happening, DDA and Public Services would be working with City Legal on executing a service agreement, and we would also be working on equipment procurement. With block by block, block by block is a turnkey solution. They have the structure in place because it's what they do. So with block by block, they have given us an 8 to 10 week timeline on launching a program. However, we, DDA, we have work to do before we could execute a contract. We have not done that work. We are behind in that. So we would need to execute a contract that would require board approval. We are locked into board meeting scheduling. So again, if we were to begin this process right away, we believe we could be ready to have a contract to our board at their June meeting, so first week in June. At that same time, during this period in May, we need to find office space and sign a lease. So assuming we could get all of that done, that first week in June, block by block could then jump in to their 8 to 10 week implementation timeline, and we'd look at, onboarding and launching a program probably in August. So in terms of a comparison, with block by block, we could be 3/4 of the way through the pilot before Public Works was able to launch. With both of these options, again, we look forward to continued collaboration with AFSCME. The DDA is ready to do the work to get a program together with Public Works. We're also ready to execute a contract with block by block. I really feel like the timeline is the piece to consider. So just to wrap it up, You have two options. You have block by block at a budget of about $834,000 with a time to implement of 4 months. You have Public Works, $930,000, time to implement 12 months. And again, I'll just add my own commentary. I think both are optimistic estimates, but that is all I have. You can open it up to discussion.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Councilmember Radina?
First of all, thank you. I know that you've been putting a lot of work and thought into this, and you've been talking to council members, and I know that you and HR have been in conversation with AFSCME, and I know that there's been a lot of work going in, and so first and foremost, I just wanted to say thank you. I know that this is a priority, I think, of all of us up here, and really, you know, obviously tonight what you're looking for is hopefully a little bit of direction through our commentary on the direction. You know, I think I've been fairly transparent with you throughout this process. My preference is obviously to go internal with Public Works. I think that that's, for me, really important. I do want to, I think, a little bit of what I'm seeing here in terms of some of the differences, there's a little bit of difference in what appears to be the number of hours and costs there, which seems to maybe indicate to me that through Public Works, the employees doing this work might be getting higher pay and higher benefits, which I think is a value that that I have in this process. I think another difference that I saw in perhaps the timeline was really kind of the early end being a lot of discussion with the union, with AFSCME. And what I see that as being is a discussion with labor now versus labor after all of this is set up, and giving labor an opportunity to weigh in on, you know, all of those important factors of the job as we're instituting it, rather than asking them to come in after the fact, hopefully have a successful organizing process, hope that, I mean, I think we have some confidence that Block by Block is genuine in their statement that they wouldn't oppose unionization, but there's no guarantee that that would happen. And also, I think just making sure that, you know, these, either way, they're going to have to staff up. These would be workers that would be hiring into a union to begin with, hiring in with better pay and better benefits. I think that's important to me, and so I'm going to continue to provide my now, you know, from the table direction that I would like to see us stay internal with Public Works. With respect to the longer timeline, I think one of the other things that I think was demonstrated through the downtown blitz that we had earlier this year is that, you know, one of the things we're really looking for is, I think, some progress being made on downtown cleanliness, really some of that work that needs to be done to make sure that people feel not only comfortable and safe downtown, but also so that they're not, you know, stepping over trash and that things are being taken care of. I think what was demonstrated is actually that over the course of that kind of week with overtime, it was, one, relatively affordable, but also our AFSCME workers did a pretty good job of doing some of that initial work. And so I'd like for us to explore the possibility of continuing to do those as this process gets set up, so that we can continue again to provide some of that overtime work that our AFSCME workers are currently asking for, but also to make sure that as we're setting this up, we're negotiating with AFSCME on the front end.
Councilor
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that point, and I wondered if in the course of these conversations, when you were looking at the pilot, the in-house pilot, if it was discussed that we would continue some of these blitzes. I mean, the 12 months is a long runway, and I understand there's a lot of pieces that need to be put in place, but we could also be utilizing our current workforce like we did for the blitz to be making progress in ways that our business community is asking for, seeing that, you know, tangible difference in cleanliness while we're working to stand up the full program.
I will defer to Public Services and maybe some discussions after this meeting to see if that's possible.
Okay, so that wasn't part of the conversation?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, well, I hope it will be. I do think, I want to also thank you for all the work that you've done on this, and I know it's been a lot of discussions back and forth with city staff, and I think it's really important that we get this right from the outset. There's a mantra in parenting, start as you mean to go on, and I think that applies here too. Like, I think it's really important that we get this right from the outset. I think starting with a privatization model and then trying to bring it in-house it's gonna be hard to do that. It's gonna be hard to make the business case to then bring it back in-house after we've already privatized it. And that is what this is. This would be privatization of what should be full-time, permanent, year-round city jobs. These are taxpayer-funded positions. As Councilmember Radina noted, clearly the city model would pay the workers better, provides better pay, better benefits, and there isn't money that's being siphoned off the top going into CEO pay and shareholder profits. This is money that's going to stay in our community, paying local city workers the pay and benefits that they should get as full-time year-round workers providing city services. Block by block, committing to not oppose unionization doesn't really impress me. That's federal law. So thank you for saying you're not going to violate federal law. That's bare minimum stuff there. Overall, I just really firmly believe that we can do this in-house. I think that we should take the time to do it right, stand it up in-house, and see what we can do in terms of any more blitzes to help make sure that our downtown business owners are feeling that their spaces are being taken care of in the way that they should be in the meantime.
Councilmember Ackman.
Thanks. So I really appreciate the work that was done in the blitzes to clean up the trash on State Street. Was just horrible, and it's something that I noticed as I would walk down there for lunch. And I didn't total up all of the reportages of the tonnages that was picked up, so I don't know what the final tally was, but it was a lot. And it seems to me that within a couple weeks, it was almost back to the same. It accumulates quickly. There's a lot of traffic down there. And so to me, that says that while city staff did a great job on a blitz, I don't really think it's going to be sustainable in even the short term, because it seems like it needs a constant, staying on top of. So when I looked at your presentation, one thing that stood out to me is obviously the length of time to implement the pilot. And the first thing that I saw before you even talked was this: neither will probably happen as quickly as we think. But do you think that one has less certainty around it than the other? And maybe it's a somewhat loaded question, because I would expect that Block by Block has done this lots of times, so they're kind of like ready to go, where we have, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainties in our process. Like there's the equipment purchase, which maybe we know that it takes a long time to get procure some of this equipment. So anyway, I wondered if you could speak to just the level of certainty around the timeline estimates and if they differ between the two models. Because to me, it would be awful if we went like a whole year and didn't resolve this in some way, start attacking it.
Right. Well, I think with Block by Block, I think there are fewer steps, so that sort of takes out like some of the uncertainty. And Block by Block does feel confident in their 8 to 10 week timeline. On our end, I'm hoping I can find a lease before June 3rd. We have work to do too. I guess I won't say either one. I think there's uncertainty with both. I would just say with Block by Block, there are fewer steps. So,
Councilmember Malik.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. This presentation was really great. In particular, I really valued the side-by-side comparison of the cost breakdown. That was really valuable. On the public works route, the 6 positions that you're estimating, these would be new positions. We wouldn't be stealing from anywhere else, correct?
Correct. Oh, I meant to say that in the presentation.
I think you made it clear. I just wanted to confirm.
I mean, there could be people in-house who apply for those jobs, but they are new positions. What I meant to say in the presentation was to point out this was not overtime, but I forgot, so thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And my next question, if appropriate, I wonder if either Mr. Roberts or Administrator Dahoney could answer, just on the experience in Public Works of the downtown blitz. Did the workers that completed the blitz, did they value this? Was the overtime really, was it valued? That's what we've been hearing, but I guess then all in sum, is that sustainable if we did it 4 times a year, if we did it once a month? I guess I just want to get some context if that's feasible.
Sure. So yes, the original blitz was the spring cleanup, had much more debris than we would see typically throughout the year because we have all the plowing and salting and things that happen downtown. But really, I'm not in a position to speak about, how sustainable it is. It did take us about 6 mornings to complete the entire blitz. So as a team, we need to talk about the implications to the operation and how sustainable we can continue to, do that over time, because we have, we had a tornado or we have water main breaks. We already have a lot of different things that happen and require overtime of our staff. So we really need to, look at our operation and kind of discuss what it would look like.
Great, thank you. And I asked that kind of in the context of, I think we've seen just how valuable the downtown cleanup is. And in my mind, the sooner the better, getting that started. So in terms of the timeline, of the longer timeline for Public Works versus the relatively shorter one for block by block, I would value closing that gap with either route with a blitz, but knowing that maybe the blitz, as we've said, isn't wildly sustainable in the long term, I would feel more comfortable, with blitzes happening over the course of 4 months as opposed to potentially 8 to 12 or longer. Or longer in either case. So I guess that's kind of where I'm falling on things is valuing a shorter timeline because it puts less pressure on our existing staff and feeling confident that even with the block by block route, we can transition over a year, especially because that year pilot would give us information on position descriptions and things like that we can then move ahead with, if that seems accurate. Thank you.
Councilor Dishton Cornell.
I'm glad you raised that last point, Councilmember Malik, because I was looking at some of the work that AFSCME would be doing, which is thinking about what are job descriptions, what's the appropriate level of skill, what's the appropriate level of pay, and yet I heard you say that you may not know those things perfectly well at the outset of this project. And so I wanted to ask you if one of the purposes of a pilot year is to figure some of that stuff out. And do you think it would be helpful to learn that through block by block? And how difficult do you think it would be to transition that knowledge into Public Works taking this on?
Well, I mean, our intention, if we were to go the block by block route, would be to continue meeting with AFSCME and to work proactively during this 12-month pilot period on firming up those job descriptions, as we learn throughout the pilot, and making it so that when the pilot with block by block wraps up, we're not going to have a 12-month timeline to transition to Public Works, right? Like that's our whole intention with a pilot, is to learn and then be able to transition it in-house more quickly than we can get a pilot up and running. And one of the things, and I think this is correct, that I feel like I think from everybody at this table, is that bringing this in-house is all of we all want to bring this in-house. I mean, I think that seemed clear to me. It's just a matter of how we get there. And like I said, we can do either option, we can make it work. But in terms of the timeline, block by block is a faster implementation, and we would, during that pilot, be continuing, working on making sure we can transition to an in-house program.
I just want to say, for my part, I'm really grateful for the work that has been done by DDA to, bring this proposal to council here, but also more crucially to have gotten here in the first place. We, for years and years, have been talking about having a set of dedicated folks who are focused on the downtown, providing service to downtown town, to the infrastructure, the immediate needs, and the visitors and residents who give our downtown vitality. We're seeing this in the DDA. We're seeing this with police who are providing additional focus. We see this with Supportive Connections. We're working on our downtown on so many different levels, and this is an opportunity. This demonstrates that we are coming together with results, and I'm grateful for that. In terms of the mechanism for it, I observe that. I observed that we have not had blitzes before, and we have endured. And I also note that with both proposals, this party will not start until Labor Day, and correct. So that's, I think, something for us all to consider.
Yep.
Those characteristics in mind, and then of course to the with expressing a great deal of gratitude and confidence and enthusiasm for the work that our employees do, each and every day, no matter where no matter where they're called upon. For all the reasons and more. For me, it's important that this is indeed an in-house project from the jump. Appreciating the work that's going to be done to get there, understanding that a lot of that's going to be done in the winter, and by the time that. By the time spring rolls around, although I appreciate staff observing that might be optimistic, it is, I think, a laudable goal to have this up and running in a real and earnest way when spring rolls around next time. And so that's something that I'll be working towards. So I just want to say thank you so much for, again, bringing this forward, and for the work that you've done with staff and the union. I know that DDA had been contemplating all sorts of different ways of getting this done. And, y'all, not just you, but the team, listened and engaged and, expressed enthusiasm about focusing on how to get the work done, and, how to get it done in the way that's best for community and for the staff that we eventually aspire to do the work, and for the values that the community represents. So up and down the line, thank you.
Great.
I got Councilmember Cornell, then Radina.
I'm going to join my colleagues in gratitude to you and your team for all the work and all the conversations and meetings I know that you've had to get to this point. I have a few questions, and I don't know if they're for you. Have we calculated in the cost comparison that you did side by side, does this include a calculation of the investment that would need to be made in overtime pay in order to do these blitzes? And I assume these blitzes would be done after every home football game, after major events. We're adding up, that would be 10 to 12 blitzes just in a small season.
The numbers you saw tonight do not include any blitz.
Okay, can that number be provided in
Well,
some way?
I think that's further discussion that we need to have with Public Services to see if there is the capacity, and, as Paul mentioned, if they would be able to continue to offer those blitzes. I don't know.
Okay, if it was part of those conversations, if we could look at being proactive versus reactionary. We know, I'm downtown almost every day. I know what it looks like after a home football game. As well, after art fair. I don't think that these are things where we could say every 3 months we're just going to wait till stuff gets to be the way that it was, and versus enduring. I'd like us to have a thriving downtown, and I think for it to be clean and for it to feel like the vibrant city that it is imperative. Can you explain how departmentally for you this would work? For the DDA, it would work in comparison? So is there any measurable difference in terms of your own staffing? Would you have to hire somebody, or would it all be managed through Public Works?
It would all be managed through Public Works. How we envision this, if we are to do a Public Works pilot, it would be fully managed by Public Works, funded by the DDA, but the goal would be to bring it to an in-house DDA team, so an AFSCME Teamster team under the DDA's umbrella.
Okay. Is there a, I don't know what to call it, but can we say we're going to do this pilot for 1 year only, and then transition over so that we are, I think, my take is a little different than Councilmember Ayers in terms of, I think we have an opportunity to learn by experts. We can learn from their model as a city, as a DDA, as, you know, what we really need from an employee standpoint, while the work is still happening, and bring it in-house. And that's kind of why I'm asking about the cost comparison between the overtime and all of that to stand it up internally.
So with Block by Block, we can sign a 12-month contract. So we can be finished with Block by Block in 1 year.
Okay. I'm not sure if that was clear before, so I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up, and again, this may not be a question for you necessarily. Thank you. I wanted to follow up on a conversation that we had that started in committee, I think, and so I'm not sure that this is necessarily a question for you, or if it may be a question for HR. But I think we had some discussion around kind of our insight into block by block hiring practices and how that would get set up during this pilot phase. Obviously, one of the questions that we had at the time was, you know, particularly because I don't think block by block would, my estimation is that they would come in and hire new folks for these positions. There wouldn't necessarily be an opportunity for us to provide any type of preference to existing temporary employees or existing employees based on seniority or things like that who might be interested in these positions. I guess I wonder if we have any insight into how they may hire for these positions, particularly on a temporary basis if they're not guaranteed to be long-term.
I can't speak to how they manage. I mean, the 1 year contract is something they offer, so I'm assuming it's something they do regularly. And their hiring practices, we know they obviously hire locally, and they look for second chance organizations. But in terms of your question about looking at current City of Ann Arbor temporary employees, I can't speak to that.
Okay.
I think if we were to go the block by block route, our goal would be to start conversations with AFSCME right at the beginning. And one of the things that we could look to is to see if there's internal temporaries that are interested, while we can't force block by block to hire them, by providing an internal reference that could provide them a better opportunity to be hired by block.
But similarly, if we were to go with a Public Works pilot, we would hypothetically have more flexibility in that, in our negotiation, because we would be the employer in setting, you know, if we wanted to set up a standard where existing temporary employees who are looking to become full-time would have some interview preference or something like that with the organization.
Yeah, there would be more flexibility internally with that approach.
Thanks. And then I think I know the answer to this question, but just to guarantee, we did approach block by block about the possibility of doing a management consultation or a management contract, and they were not interested in providing us that type of service, correct?
Right, it's just not their business model, and they heard me out, and then absolutely not, yeah.
Okay.
I tried.
All right, thank you. I think those were my two main questions. I'm kind of going through my notes here. I think, you know, I appreciate kind of all the conversation around this. I would echo, I think, the mayor's comments around the fact that, you know, we don't currently have a service that's doing this work right now. And I think there are, what I think in referencing the downtown blitz as, is that we do have some expertise in being able to do the work well and to do the work. I think we got positive feedback about how it looked afterwards. I absolutely am not like under any assumption that this will stay permanently without permanent, work being done. But I think that there's, at least from my perspective, value in us moving forward with a plan that keeps these jobs as public union workers. These are, in my view, public jobs. They're exactly the type of thing that should fall under public works. The reality is simply that the existing model currently has, property owners responsible for a lot of this work that we're trying to take on. And so, I'm going to continue to say I think we can look at some of the short-term ways to make things better so that people are seeing noticeable improvements as we work towards kind of the perfect model. But I do really have concerns about initially outsourcing this work and then trying to bring it back in a way that that I think we would be. I don't think we can replicate it in a way that would be done if we were negotiating with AFSCME from the front end, setting it up internally from the front end. We'd be trying to take an existing pilot and probably cut and paste it back into the system, or be doing all of this work again on the back end of trying to set things up and the time that may take. And does that mean another extension of the contract and all of those things? And I think it just leaves a lot of questions long term when I think we can be setting it up internally from the beginning. And so that continues to be my preference. Thanks.
So in light of the time, perhaps we've got one more person in the queue, and then since there has been some conversation at the table, maybe we come back with something structured at another time for DDAs to engage at that point. Councilor, or not.
I was just going to clarify to Councilmember Cornell's questions about the blitz being factored in, and that's, the blitzes are outside of this ongoing cost, right? And so I think that's like until we get that in place. So I wouldn't add that in the column of Public Works side. It's outside of that. But yeah, I think something structured is necessary here. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all so much.
We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers in all instances will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk or the time clock will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Anyone in-house like to speak at public comment? Would anyone online like to speak at public comment?
Mayor, I don't have any callers online.
Are there communications from council? As if we haven't been communicating. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Cornell, second by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, all in favor or opposed? We're adjourned.
Oh, we got them closer than I thought we would.